You made a decision today and then spent 20 minutes wondering what someone else would think of it. Not because the decision was unclear to you, you knew what you wanted to do, but somewhere in the middle of knowing, a different question inserted itself. What will they think? Will they understand? Will this look right to the people whose opinion, if you are honest, should not carry the weight it carries? This happens to men who have built real authority, men who lead, men who are, by any external measure, no longer in a position where they should need anyone's permission. And yet the need persists, quiet and specific, attached to certain people whose approval you have never stopped seeking, even though you could not always say why. That is not weakness. It is one of the most universal and least examined patterns a man with real responsibility carries. And the Stoics, along with the psychological work that came centuries after them, identified exactly where it comes from and exactly what it takes to actually let it go. Not perform letting it go, actually let it go. What follows is not a technique for caring less what people think. It is the answer to a more specific and more useful question. Why does this need exist at all, and what replaces it when a man genuinely outgrows it? Where the need actually comes from. Most men assume the need for approval is simply a personality trait. Some men have it more, some less, and that is just how people are built. That assumption is comfortable because it removes the need to examine the mechanism. It is also incomplete in a way that keeps the need firmly in place. Carl Jung spent decades studying where this specific pattern originates, and his findings are more precise than the general explanation most men settle for. He observed that the need for approval is rarely about the present moment in which it appears. It is almost always a residue of an earlier period in a man's life, when approval was not optional, when it was directly tied to safety, belonging, or survival in some form. A child who learns that affection is conditional on performance carries that conditioning forward long after the original conditions have disappeared. He becomes an adult who has built genuine competence, genuine independence, genuine authority, and who still, in specific situations with specific people, feels the old requirement activate. Because some part of him has not yet received the update that the original danger is gone. This is what Jung meant when he described the unconscious directing a man's life and him calling it fate. The man does not experience this as an old pattern running. He experiences it as a present reality. The need to be approved of by his father, by a former mentor, by a specific kind of authority figure, feels exactly as urgent and exactly as real as any current circumstance. The Stoics arrived at a related understanding through a different path. They did not have the language of childhood development, but they understood with precision that the disturbance a man feels is never produced directly by external circumstances. It is produced by the judgment he has attached to those circumstances. And judgments, unlike the circumstances themselves, are formed over time, shaped by repetition, and capable of being far older than the situation that currently triggers them. Nowhere can man find a quieter or more untroubled retreat than in his own soul, especially if he has within him such thoughts that by looking into them, he is immediately in perfect ease. That untroubled retreat is not naturally available to a man who has outsourced his sense of being acceptable to people who are not actually evaluating him anymore. If they ever truly were in the way he believes, the retreat becomes available only when the man has done the work of understanding why the requirement exists in the first place. This tracing is not a single conversation a man has with himself once and then resolves permanently. It is closer to an ongoing investigation because the need for approval rarely announces itself honestly. It disguises itself as professionalism. The careful checking of a decision with someone whose actual judgment does not matter as much as the man tells himself it does. It disguises itself as humility, the deference to an opinion that, examined honestly, is not actually more informed than his own. It disguises itself as relationship maintenance, the constant small adjustments made to keep a particular person comfortable. The specificity matters here. This is not a general statement that all men care too much what others think. The pattern this video is describing is usually narrow and precise. It attaches to particular people, often people who occupy a role that echoes an earlier figure from the man's life, an authority figure, a parent, someone whose recognition once carried disproportionate weight. A man can be completely indifferent to the opinions of strangers, colleagues he does not respect, even people whose judgment he actively distrusts, while remaining acutely sensitive to the reaction of one specific person or one specific category of person. That narrowness is actually useful information. It tells him exactly where to look. The need is not diffuse. It has an address. Write in the comments one person whose approval you have never stopped seeking, even though you can no longer fully explain why. You do not have to name them. Just acknowledge that the person exists. Why success does not resolve this. There is a specific and frustrating discovery that many successful men make at some point, usually privately and usually without saying it out loud. Achievement does not resolve the need for approval. It only changes its audience. The man who needed his father's approval and never received it in the form he wanted often spends decades building a career, a reputation, a level of success specifically calibrated to finally earn that approval. And in many cases, the success arrives. The career is real. The reputation is real. But the specific ache, the need for that one particular approval, frequently does not resolve. It either persists unchanged or it transfers to a new figure who unconsciously represents the same unmet requirement. This is one of the most important things to understand about this pattern. They assume that enough external validation would eventually satisfy the need. It does not, because the need was never actually about validation in the general sense. It was about a specific, often unconscious contract formed early in life that says something will finally be settled once a particular kind of acknowledgement is received, and no amount of unrelated success settles a contract that specific. Jung observed that what is not made conscious will continue to operate exactly as it always has, regardless of how much the man's external circumstances change. The success simply gives the need better camouflage. It becomes harder for the man himself to recognize, because he appears to be someone who should no longer have this problem. This is why the Stoic practice is not aimed at acquiring more validation, more proof, more achievement that might finally be sufficient. It is aimed at the judgment itself. Marcus Aurelius, ruling the most powerful empire of his time, still wrote to himself about the pull towards seeking approval from men whose judgment he did not actually respect. His position did not exempt him. Nothing happens to anybody which he is not fitted by nature to bear. That capacity to bear what arises, including the discomfort of not receiving an approval he wanted, is not built through more achievement. It is built through the specific work of seeing the pattern clearly enough that it loses its disguise. There is a particular kind of grief that accompanies this recognition, and it is worth naming because most men are not prepared for it. Realizing that decades of achievement were partly organized around securing an approval that achievement was never actually capable of securing can feel less like liberation and more like loss. This grief is not something to rush past. The Stoics did not teach the avoidance of difficult feelings. They taught the accurate examination of them. A man who skips past this recognition in favor of immediately feeling better about it has likely not actually done the work. Name it in the comments. One area of success in your life where, if you are honest, the underlying need for someone's approval is still unresolved despite the achievement. What the Stoics actually proposed instead. Once the origin of the need is visible, the Stoic response is not what most modern interpretations suggest. It is not indifference. It is not the performance of not caring, which most men can detect in themselves as a thin layer over a need that is still very much active underneath. The Stoic proposal is more precise and considerably more demanding. It is the deliberate construction of an internal standard that does not depend on external confirmation to be valid. It is the slower, more honest work of building a clear enough understanding of your own values, your own judgment, and your own conduct that external approval becomes interesting rather than necessary. Epictetus, who had lived through the complete absence of control over his own circumstances as a slave before gaining his freedom, understood this distinction with unusual clarity. He taught that a man's good lies entirely in things that are his own, his judgments, his intentions, his actions, and that anything placed outside of that makes a man dependent on something he cannot govern. The practical application of this is not abstract. It begins with a specific question that a man can ask the next time he notices himself wanting someone's approval. Do I actually disagree with my own judgment here? Or am I simply uncomfortable that someone else has not confirmed it? Those are two entirely different situations, and most men conflate them. This distinction matters because it protects a man from two opposite failures. The first failure is the man who decides he should simply stop listening to feedback altogether, mistaking Stoic self-reliance for closed-minded stubbornness. The second failure is the man who continues to need confirmation for decisions he has already examined thoroughly and trusts, simply because the old pattern has not yet released its grip. There is a third failure worth naming, because it is subtler than the other two. This is the man who performs indifference. He has learned the language of not caring what others think, and he deploys it convincingly. But underneath the performance, the old need is still fully operational. He has simply added a layer of sophistication to the same dependency. Now he needs people to see him as someone who does not need their approval, which is itself a request for approval, just 1 degree removed. This third failure is worth taking seriously because it is the one most likely to trap a man who is genuinely trying to do this work. The test is uncomfortable but reliable. Ask what happens internally in a moment when the approval is withheld and no one is watching the man's reaction to its absence. If there is still a private sting, the work is not finished. Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. Making the specific need for a specific person's approval conscious, naming it, tracing it to where it actually began, is what allows a man to respond to his own judgment, rather than to an old requirement wearing the costume of the present moment. Write in the comments. One decision you are currently sitting on, waiting for someone's reaction before you fully commit to it, even though you already know what you think is right. What replaces the need when it actually resolves? There is a specific quality that emerges in a man who has done this work consistently over time, and it is worth describing precisely because it is frequently misunderstood from the outside. It is not indifference to other people. The man who has genuinely resolved this need for a specific approval does not become cold or dismissive of feedback. If anything, he becomes more capable of receiving feedback well, because he is no longer filtering it through the anxious question of whether it constitutes approval or disapproval. What replaces the need is something the Stoics described as a kind of internal sufficiency, not arrogance, not the belief that he no longer needs anyone, but a settled confidence in his own capacity to evaluate his own conduct accurately. Marcus Aurelius described the men who had achieved this as operating from their own citadel, an inner fortress that external opinion could not breach, not because the man had become unreachable, but because he had built, deliberately and over years, a clear enough understanding of his own values, that he no longer needed the citadel's walls, confirmed by people standing outside it. This citadel is not built through a single decision to be more confident. It is built the same way any structure is built, through repeated, deliberate action over time. Each time a man notices the old pull toward needing a specific approval, examines it honestly, and chooses to act from his own assessment, he adds something to the structure. This sufficiency also changes a man's relationships, often in ways he does not anticipate. The relationships that were sustained primarily by his need for approval either deepen into something more honest, because he is no longer performing for them, or they reveal themselves to have been built on very little once the performance stops. There is a specific category of relationship worth naming directly. The relationship with the original figure whose approval started the pattern, a parent, a mentor, an early authority, often does not need to end or even change dramatically for the internal need attached to it to resolve. What changes is the man's relationship with his own reaction to that person. Your visions will become clear only when you can look into your own heart. Who looks outside dreams. Who looks inside awakes. The man who is awake in this specific sense does not need less from people. He needs different things from them. He no longer needs them to confirm that he is acceptable. That shift, more than any single technique, is what the Stoics were actually describing when they talked about freedom from external opinion. Not the absence of caring, the absence of needing. The practice and what it asks of you. Here is the recap of what this video has covered. The need for approval that persists in adulthood is almost never about the present situation in which it appears. It is a residue of an earlier period when approval was tied to safety or belonging, and it continues operating long after those original conditions have disappeared. Success does not resolve this need. It only changes its audience or gives it better camouflage, which is why accomplished men frequently still feel this pull and are often confused or ashamed that they do. The Stoic response is not indifference performed as a personality trait. It is the deliberate construction of an internal standard. The discipline of asking whether discomfort reflects a genuine doubt in your own judgment, or simply the absence of external confirmation for a judgment you already trust. What replaces the need when the work is done consistently is not coldness toward other people. It is a settled internal sufficiency that allows a man to receive feedback clearly, maintain relationships honestly, and stop performing for approval that was never actually going to settle the original unmet requirement. The practice begins with a single honest exercise. Take the person you named earlier, the one whose approval you have never stopped seeking. Ask yourself plainly, what would it mean if their approval never came? Not what would you do differently. What would actually happen? In most cases, the man discovers that very little of practical consequence would actually change. Sit with that discomfort deliberately for a few minutes, without trying to resolve it or distract from it. That sitting, repeated whenever the old pattern activates, is the actual practice. This practice will not feel productive in the way other forms of self-improvement feel productive. The change happens the way most genuine character change happens, slowly, beneath the threshold of dramatic experience. It is worth being honest about the timeline here. A need that was constructed over years of repetition, often starting in childhood, does not dissolve over a few weeks of intentional practice. Marcus Aurelius was still examining his own pull towards seeking the wrong kind of approval, well into his reign as emperor. Decades after he had first encountered the philosophical principles meant to address it. What makes the patience bearable is the same thing that makes any long-term practice bearable. The gradual accumulation of evidence that something is actually shifting. These small shifts are the actual texture of the change. They rarely arrive as a single transformative realization. They arrive as a gradual loosening, noticed mostly in hindsight. Over time, the pull weakens, not because the man has stopped caring about people, because he has stopped requiring a specific verdict from a specific source in order to consider his own conduct settled. That is what the Stoics meant by freedom. Not the absence of a relationship, the absence of a debt that was never actually going to be collected in the form he was waiting for. This is the work this video has described, not a technique to apply once. A relationship with yourself to rebuild, one honest examination at a time, until the need that once felt like a permanent feature of your character reveals itself for what it actually was, a pattern formed under specific conditions that no longer matches the man you have become. If this is the kind of work you want to keep building, this channel is here every week. Every video takes one idea further than the last. Subscribe so you do not miss what comes next.